Welcome to Spirit's Journey, coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. Your hosts are Patrick and Kathryn Andries.
Join us each week as we explore a wide range of metaphysical topics such as dreams, astrology, intuitive readings, and life purpose. You'll receive practical guidance so that you can live your most awesome life.
Learn more about what we do at intuitiveschool.com and connect with us on Facebook at Spirit's Journey Radio. Welcome to Spirit's Journey. We are coming to you on Truth Frequency Radio, simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. You can also find us on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and TalkStream Live, among others. We're here in the Heartland, holding the energy for spiritual truth and awareness. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Kathryn. Welcome, everyone. We have an amazing guest today that I think her message is needed now more than ever. Today we're going to be talking with Ginny Whitelaw. She is a Rinzai Zen master and founder and CEO of the Institute for Zen Leadership. She's a biophysicist by training, and she combines a rich scientific background with senior leadership experience at NASA and 25 years developing leaders in global companies, nonprofits, and executive educational programs. She is an expert in development of the whole leader. And she's authored several books, which we're going to talk about today, including The Zen Leader and her latest release, Resonate. And she also developed an amazing little like a quiz called Phoebe, which measures 4 patterns of personality that connect body, mind, and behaviors, and uses it to train practitioners worldwide in this Phoebe method. In nearly 10 years at NASA, Dr. Whitelaw became the deputy manager for integrating the International Space Station, for which she received NASA's Exceptional Service Medal. She has a PhD in biophysics and a 5th degree black belt in Aikido. Welcome, Ginny.
Hi, Ginny.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kathryn and Patrick.
That is such an impressive background that you have, everything from NASA to biophysics. It's fascinating. And I know my husband is so excited because he loves blending science and spirituality and all that good stuff. So I think one of the core things about your work, Ginny, is this idea of resonate. And that's also what your new book is about. So what is it to resonate, and why do we even care about what this resonate is?
Well, it is a complete blend of science and spirituality in a sense, because it really links the physical world with the energetic world. To resonate is to vibrate with. It is a physical phenomenon. And it was really in my physics background that I learned a great deal about resonance. I worked all through college. I worked in a high energy physics lab. And one of the things I love about that field is how it really studies that cusp between energy and matter. At certain resonant frequencies, energetic conditions will solidify or stabilize into matter. And fast forward into my work with leadership, I really have come to see that as a frame for leadership as well, where leaders are forever turning energy, the energy of ideas, the energy of teamwork, the energy of relationships, into things that matter in this world, things that are good for people. And this principle of resonance applies at every scale, from the tiniest particle wave to societies and organizations and the differences that you and I make every day. We make those differences through resonance.
So, Ginny, how does this resonate with the law of attraction? And a lot of our listeners are familiar with, what you put out, you get back, you attract to yourself. Is this similar, just different wording?
There is a connection. There's in the sense that how you resonate in your own physical, energetic being is putting something into the field around you at all times. That is a physical fact. We are pumping out an electromagnetic field. We can't help it because we have iron in our blood. We have charged particles running through our spinal fluid. We are an electromagnetic being, and those fields are now measurable. This isn't this isn't some kind of a woo-woo statement. These are now things that can be studied and measured very concretely. And that field changes the more coherent we are in our instrument, when we have alignment or coherence between our brain waves, our heart, even our breathing, which can be regulated from deep in the body, the lower abdomen, that is such a power center in the martial arts. When we are connected, aligned, and coherent, the way we're feeding the field is much more powerful and coherent. So how does that relate to attraction? In a way, it is a kind of magnetism. We become more warmer to be around. We send out a more resonant signal. We become people that others want to be with when we are in this kind of coherent, stable state, rather than when we're kind of jagged and incoherent and anxious and uptight, you know, those various triggered states that we can get into.
And so, Ginny, is that similar to, you know, when you're talking about the internal coherence and everything, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking, is it when I'm basically aligned with my desires, when my head and my heart are saying the same thing? In other words, my heart has a desire and I follow through with that. You could look at it as, you know, living your purpose, being aligned, living in your joy. Is that kind of what you're alluding to?
Sure. You know, I think what we experience as our purpose is when that joy emerges, you know, when we feel like, whoa, that is so on track for me. You know, it's almost a reflection we have when we're in that flow. When you think about the kind of the purposes that call you the most, they're associated with a clear intent along with a lot of positive emotion. And what we know from work that groups like the Heart Math Institute have done, and Joe Dispenza has popularized, that when that elevated positive generative emotion is combined with clear intent, we are much more powerful beings in the world, which means also we're much more likely to be able to resonate with the forces that are around us. So part of the principle of resonance, and this goes back to your question about law of attraction, is how well do we listen to these forces around us? How well are we plugged into what is going on in a way that we can move with it, work with these larger, the energy patterns that are around us, and add our part. And as we resonate naturally with the forces around us and do exactly what is ours to do, our psychological experience of that is living our most significant life, living and leading on purpose.
So this year's obviously been quite different than a lot of people thought it was going to be at the beginning of the year. And so there's been a lot of upheaval, a lot of tension and things going on. So how can people use that principle of resonance to navigate in what we're experiencing right now?
Well, we're reminded in this COVID time that viruses were the first thing to go viral. In other words, to resonate wildly. And so even the virus shows us some of the principles of resonance, that when we are connected through our life habits, and we all have a personal agency or a personal way to get this virus, and our effects can add up, things can go viral. Things can resonate at a level where they become, in a negative sense, a global pandemic. Now you flip that around and you say, how do we navigate this time? Well, there's a kind of agility that's certainly called for. I mean, we've seen where this COVID time is, in a sense, putting a stress on so many systems and on so many people. And in a way, it's accelerating and highlighting the weaknesses that we see in systems, whether it's in, you know, retail stores that are, or restaurants that are having a hard time staying open, whether it's in frontline healthcare systems that are having a hard time coping with the influx of illness, or with how radically different the illnesses they need to treat are. They're not getting the elective surgeries, but they're getting this influx of people who are ill with COVID. This is a huge shift. So how does resonance help us navigate it? We have to feel what is real. We have to feel what is really going on, and in a way, let it change us. It's a kind of visceral listening, where we take in the condition as it is, not as you or I might want it to be, but as it is, and say, how does this let me act? How do I let this change me in a way where I can be consonant with these conditions and even co-create with them? So we figure out, each of us is figuring out, how do I accord these changes? And that approach is a very, I want to say, Zen-like way of working with life, where we sometimes will describe Zen as like a ball on fast-moving waters. If you picture a ball on fast-moving waters, you can see what it's doing as the waters pick up or get turbulent. It just rolls and turns and moves at speed and bounces off obstacles and keeps going. But it doesn't, stop and try to decide if it likes these waters. But if you throw a human being into fast-moving waters, what do? Well, we often flail and scurry and try to protect ourselves and grab for rocks and reeds or whatever we can to feel safe. And in all of that flurry and scurry, we trigger ourselves. The way we end up reacting to life rather than working with it. So when tensions mount, when times pick up, when things get upended and upturned, how can we center ourselves in our own being to work with it, no matter what it is? Because you and I can't control what happens out there. We control how we react to it in here, and yet that makes a world of difference. Because when we can center ourselves and co-create with this energy, even if co-creating with it means right now I have to listen to these conditions and I don't travel. I have to move all my courses online. I have to use the kind of format we're using right now to reach people. Then you do it. You let it change you.
So with this spiritual approach and this blend of science and spirituality, there's these two, it seems like, conflicting philosophies here, because there's the one philosophy where you're describing that we accept things as they are, but then we also have this kind of a urge within us, it seems like, where we say, well, I have free will. I want to be able to chart my course. And we also have this creative power of imagination within our mind, where we can actually imagine things being different than they are, and that we can actually start to, as you mentioned, co-create. So how would you help people reconcile those two differences between just accepting things as they are and using our creative abilities to really be able to shape and mold and co-create our future?
It's a great question. When I speak about acceptance, I'm not speaking about acquiescence. I'm not saying that we just say, oh, it's the way it is and I can't do anything. But what I invite you, even right now, as you're listening to these words, any of you listening to these words, feel into your own physical body. Just feel into your own body, and for a moment, imagine yourself in a state of complete acceptance. If you had to somehow portray that word acceptance in a game of charades, how would you physically do that? And do you notice that instantly something in your body relaxes? It's in this more relaxed state that we vibrate more freely. We actually become more sensitive to what is going on around us. In other words, we're in a more resonant state. Now, that acceptance sits at the cusp between two states that in Zen leadership I distinguish as coping versus transforming. When we haven't gotten to a state of acceptance yet, we're coping with situations, we're reacting outside in, and there's always a tension in the body around that. I don't like this, I'm indignant, I'm complaining, I'm blaming, I'm gossiping, I'm folding my arms and rolling my eyes, or I'm angry, or I'm in denial. Those are all coping modes. And they all are accompanied by tension in the body that makes us less aware of what's really going on. We aren't according the myriad changes of life. We aren't a ball on fast-moving waters. We're resisting life, right? But once we enter acceptance, it's like that 0 point where things can shift, where we go from a negative valence emotion to a place where now we go, it is what it is. How do I work with this? And a curiosity opens up. And from that 0 point, the energy starts coming through us, not us fending off the world, but in a sense, channeling that energy through us, through our differentiated self, Now that we can have that relaxation to vibrate more freely with what is, how do I mix in with it my clear intention, my desire to create something? You know, how do I blend in what is with that? When we start working with that what isness and blend in our intention, now we're co-creators with life. But if we don't accept the what isness, we can be fighting with life in a very futile way. You know, it's just a example. Imagine a sailor in a boat who wants to win a race or sail to a certain mark. If they're not paying attention to the waves and the current, if they're not accepting the weather conditions as they are, they say, no, I want wind out of the south, and instead it's out of the north. I'm just going to set my sails the way I want. That's my free will. Well, they're not going to accomplish anything. But if they listen to life, if they listen to the weather conditions exactly as they are and accept this is the condition right now, I still want to go to that mark, I'll set my sails accordingly. So I've let the condition change what I do in a way that I can still achieve my goal. And sometimes we can't get to exactly the goal we wanted to exactly the way we planned, but we do what we can. And as we adjust to life, we're able to work with the condition in a way that we have the most energy to work with, without that kind of tension and obstruction that is so unproductive.
That was such a beautiful analogy, Ginny, of the sailor. My dad was a sailor, so growing up, you know, I would just watch him, you know, having to go with the flow. If it was raining, you know, how was he going to deal with it? And I think a lot of people can relate to that. And so, you know, as we're talking about this idea of resonating and going with the flow, so to speak, I know a lot of that has to do with our energy patterns. And in your book, The Zen Leader, and on your website, which is focusleadership.com, you have this really fun, very revelatory survey or quiz called Phoebe, which stands for Focus Energy Balance Indicator. And so by taking this, I wondered if, you know, you can see which of the 4 energy patterns you have. And so maybe you could talk a little about like why would somebody want to do this quiz, and what does it tell us when we figure out our energy pattern, and what do we do with that information?
Yeah, it adds a lot to our understanding of how we can resonate with conditions, because sometimes you have to push, sometimes you have to hold and be very disciplined, sometimes you have to roll with the punches, and sometimes you have to let go. And those are 4 different physical patterns in the nervous system. And that's what Phoebe measures. What it looks at is it's a personality quiz, if you will, or a personality instrument, and like other personality tests, it will tell us what our preferences are. It's sort of like handedness. You and I will have a preference for some of these patterns over others. But it goes further than that, in that life will always call for all 4. And let me correct that. Life will eventually call for all 4. In this moment, there will be some pattern that helps us resonate with conditions better than others. So what are the patterns? If you just feel into your physical body right now, the pattern of driver is a pattern of pressing. So if you take your hands and press them together, press them hard, you could feel something at the very base of the torso, almost the pelvic floor, start lighting up or start getting into the act. And that is a key center in the martial arts. It's a center of power and thrust and pushing, and coordinates enormous power in the body. And in leadership behaviors, it's a power of drive and urgency, even as you hear in my voice. It's an essential pattern, and yet used at the wrong time, it can run over people, or it can push you at the wrong moment, where you're pushing against a brick wall and it's not going anywhere. The second pattern, if you just sit up straight and just feel the composure in the front and back of the body, and maybe just make your hands into the sides and front and back of a box, just feel that orderliness, or into 3 steps. You might think about 3 parts of a project plan, or just hold yourself in form. That sort of even-sidedness in the body brings us into a pattern we call the organizer, which is very disciplined in process and stepwise, as you might even hear in my voice. It looks at things logically and in a very repeatable conscientious way. So it's a key pattern for process and discipline, repeatability, reliability, quality. An essential pattern, but used at the wrong time can be stuck in process or put form over substance. And then if you enter more into a sloshing, rocking movement, even as you listen to my voice now, if you just start rocking in your seat, you can feel the body starts loosening up. If you make simple little figure eights with your hands, you can kind of feel the watery, sloshy pattern we call the collaborator, which starts moving the nervous system into an alternating rhythm that's very resilient, that literally lands with a bounce and becomes resilient with life. It's also playful and engaging with people when you think about how humans will shake hands or get on the same wavelength with each other. This is a pattern that will really catch the resonance with other people. So it can be very useful in getting people moving with your ideas. And finally, if you just open your hands so that your thumbs are almost growing out of your ears. So you open your hands to see peripheral vision all around you and the entire dome all around you. So your eyes come into a soft focus. And then feel on the underside of your arm, the extensor side of your arm, a sense of energy radiating out through your fingertips. That bigness welcomes us into the visionary pattern. And that pattern is wonderful for ideation and imagination and leaping thought and possibility. And it needs its other friends, the collaborator, the organizer, and the driver to get stuff done. So it's the mix of these different energies in us that take us from the world of ideas into a very practical world where stuff gets done through people and through our own determination. And it's in the blend of patterns, using the right one at the right time, that we become our most effective self.
Wow, that's great. So where do we go with this after we understand, which one of these qualities that we resonate with? Maybe we learn something about how the people in our team resonates. Where do we go with that after we know that information?
Well, that's the beauty of it, because when you make something physical, you make it trainable, you make it practicable. And so when you put it in the body, you can actually build a practice that will pattern the nervous system in ways that give you access to any pattern you need at any moment. As I mentioned earlier, and what the Phoebe measures is our natural or our habitual preferences around these patterns, because we all have them. And for some of us, we're very strongly in one or two of them, just like some of us are very strongly right or left-handed, and others of us are more ambidextrous, or in this case, ambi-patterned. So knowing that Phoebe tells us what our own preferences are and how strong they are, but it goes further to say, now what? How do I work with this? Well, if there's something going on in your life where you need more of these energies, or one of these energies, so say that you're full of ideas, but nothing's getting done, that you're missing some of that driver energy, well, there's a practice for that. In fact, there's all kinds of practices for that, and the Phoebe report gives them to you. And there's even some resources on our website that give you some insight into how you can start practicing these patterns. These are also things that we teach in our Zen Leader courses, and that the books like the Zen Leader or Resonate give you practices for each of the patterns. So if you do things hard and fast and with determination and pushing, once one part of the body starts going into the pattern, the whole mind-body tends to follow. So we get not only the physicality of the pattern, but the mental processing of it as well. And then when we can use the right pattern at the right time, we can do things in the most efficacious way. We're not burning our energy out randomly. We're actually able to use the energy that's right and resonant with the moment.
I love that. I can see how valuable this could be, not only for corporations, but schools, with students, with teachers. I mean, that's our profession, is teaching. So I'm going to incorporate this for sure this year into our coursework. But, right now, going back to, everything going on in the world and the divisive politics, a lot of people are putting their energy into talking about what they don't like. They hate this person, they don't like this policy, whatever. does it do anything to fight against those things? Or would it be better for us, if we don't like this system, if we don't like a certain person, to just completely unplug from that and to create something that we do resonate with? Like, okay, if I don't like public school system, I'm going to create my own school, as opposed to just continually bashing that other system or trying to put my energy into changing that system. Is that an example of going against the current?
Yes, I think you give some good examples of going against the current. I think it's a different answer for different people, because some of us are born contrarians and disruptors or entrepreneurs and innovators. And if we don't like this, we'll go build a new one. And others of us are determined to make broken systems work. But I go back to a lovely line from Eckhart Tolle that I remember from reading his book years ago, and it's so true for resonance. He said, if you're not in a state of acceptance, joy, or enthusiasm in what you're doing, just stop, because you're just making things worse. And from a point of view of resonance, what we know is when you're in one of those coping modes, when you're angry or you're upset or you're resentful or regretful or you've got a negative vibe, I'll put it that way. You're jagged inside, you're jagged in your brain waves, you're sending a jagged signal into the field. It's not going to be an attractive law operating. It's going to be a kind of repulsive law. You may be able to disrupt and overturn and create some havoc.
All right, we need to put a pin in it for right there. We'll pick up with this when we get back. We're going to be going into a short break. This is Spirit's Journey on Truth Frequency Radio, Oneness Talk Radio, and we will see you on the other side. From the break. If you're just joining us, this is Spirit's Journey with Patrick and Kathryn Andries, coming to you on Truth Frequency Radio, being simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio, among others. Today we have Ginny Whitelaw. She is the author of 2 books, The Zen Leader, and also her new book, Resonate, which is coming out October 13th. So welcome back, Ginny. Can you tell us a little bit about your new book that's coming out?
Yes, thank you, Patrick. Yeah, Resonate really was spurred by when we were talking about some of the big changes in the world. And one of my colleagues, Gordon Green Roshi, put it, how do we change how change happens? How do we change how change happens? And instantly I thought, well, change always happens through resonance. The physicist in me is going like, whoa, how do we change the conditions for resonance? And then the Zen teacher in me thought, well, that's what we're doing all the time in our training. I mean, what Zen is training is changing the resonance, the physical vibration of the instrument we get to lead with, which is the mind-body system. So how to put those two things together in a way where people could change their resonance to live their most significant lives. That really started burning in me and was the motivation behind resonance. I really feel these turbulent times are calling something out of us. And I would love for people to be up to it, to be able to give their best selves to it, to live their most significant lives.
So the subtitle of your book is Zen in the Way of Making a Difference. And so that's a very spiritual title. I know you have a very strong scientific background. I really resonate with that myself because I have a degree in physics and biology, but I started out with this love of science. And so I really appreciate all your experience in NASA. I really loved everything NASA was doing, going out and exploring our solar system, exploring the universe. And then I took this very long, deep breath into spirituality, where I didn't really spend a lot of time looking at things and exploring things scientifically. I dove deep spiritually, but then I felt this urge kind of coming back within me that it's time to get back into the science. And so I really started looking at physics and biology. I thought those were the two disciplines that really seemed to fit the best with all the things that I was doing. And so I see that you are also a biophysicist and have a doctorate in that. And so I'm curious, how do you combine science and spirituality? Because I'm seeing more and more of a trend, which actually I think is very encouraging, that a lot of people are seeing that connection between science and spirituality. How do you combine those two?
Well, I think we as humans yearn to combine them because they're both aspects of who we are. They're both adventures into trying to figure out what the heck is going on and how do we fit into that, right? So, and truthfully, in a lot of human history, science and spirituality were together. They really just separated a few hundred years ago, before 400 years ago, right? And now we're seeing how they can come together through many of the disciplines that you and I have visited. Where things that used to be considered woo-woo and completely spiritual, like, energy around the body or a halo around someone's head or something, well, you can start to measure those things. You actually can, not all of us can see auras, but you can measure them. We know that the self doesn't stop at the skin anymore. When I was in graduate school, there was still a lot of speculation about what's this connection between meditation and its effects on the nervous system. There have since been thousands of papers published in peer-reviewed journals about the effects of meditation on the nervous system. So what we think of as spiritual practices have very practical health and wellness effects in our physical bodies and in our mental health. So I think we live at a time where it's natural to bring science and spirituality together because in a way, our science has become spiritual and our spirituality has become scientific. Meaning, I'll give an example of each. You look at physics. Physics since the early 1900s to me has been spiritual because it posits a world of vibrating wave particles. It's in a quantum world that we now need 10 dimensions to describe, where you and I can roughly perceive 3. A world of 10 dimensions, we have to be humbled by how much we are not actually able to take in through our physical senses. If we're able to sense in any way, to me, that's a very spiritual dimension. And conversely, when I say spirituality has become scientific, so many things that we used to think were simply woo-woo concepts have now become measurable on magnetometers, on EEG recordings. We now see things like when the back row of an auditorium sends goodwill toward the front row of an auditorium, it changes the brain waves of the front row. These consciousness being non-local has been measured again and again. To me, that's remarkable and wonderful. And one thing I love about resonance is it really sits at the intersection between the two because it's a physical fact. When waves come together, they change each other. They vibrate together. It's a physical fact, and through what we call spiritual disciplines, you can change how you physically resonate. You can vibrate with the energies around you, and what I call in the book universal energy, the sum total of energy available, and bring it through your differentiated self. To me, that's marvelous.
And so, Ginny, I was curious, a lot of us feel completely out of whack within ourselves, right? We're not experiencing the alignment that you were talking about earlier. We don't feel like we're resonating or flowing with life. And so what are the reasons that, a lot of us have these, inner constrictions, whatever you want to call it, and how can we get back into the flow?
It's so human and so natural to have these inner constrictions because it really comes with the way humans develop, the way we grow up, and even our heritage. We didn't start out exactly a blank slate. We started out with, a set of a DNA, a set of conditions of our birth, perhaps some intergenerational trauma we inherited. Maybe just getting through our childhood was a mess. And when you look at how the nervous system develops, it matures in a way from the base, and not just from the brainstem base, but I mean from the base of the body, from the root, where we learn how to walk, for example, before we learn how to talk. The lower body, both the spinal ganglia that control movement and the enteric nervous system, these are developing first. And so deep in our gut, as it were, even before we're rational, even before we can make sense of the world, we're taking in patterns and responding to trying to figure out, how can we be safe in this world? How can we get on with it? And there's often a lot of deep and stored trauma from our early life, from whether we had a secure or insecure attachment with a significant adult. I mean, these things have been studied from a lot of different disciplines, but things get buried in the body and stored in the body because matter is a very condensed form of energy that can store a great deal of, if you will, memory. And we grow up into a more rational state. We grow up into an adulthood state. We grow up eventually adding the heart, the head in its maturation. And by the time we get to start making choices about our life and choices about how we want to be in this world, we've got stuff to work through. We've got some cleanup to do from things that have been buried and embedded habits early in life, and sometimes a very jagged incoherence. I don't know anyone who gets a free pass through childhood. I remember one of the jokes or cartoons I loved so much. It was kind of a New Yorker sort of cartoon of a completely empty auditorium. And the caption on it read, "The annual convention of healthy children from functional families."
That's great.
So by the time we grow up, we have some cleanup work to do. Now, how do we do that cleanup work? That's where the whole second part of Resonate comes in, because it really answers the question, how can we be our most resonant self? And there's three things that we need to do. One is we need to integrate. We need to start getting disconnected parts of the body talking to each other again so we can build up that coherence. The second is we need to tune ourselves, so get extra tension out of the body so that we can vibrate freely with conditions. So tuning, and often you can work with sound in very creative ways for tuning the body. And third is what I call taming. And this is where Zen training comes in a big way. Taming our fears, our impulses, even our ego, so that we start to use our ego as a tool in service of life rather than trying to use life to make the ego feel safe. If you understand that fundamental flip, it's a flip I talk and write about a lot in the Zen Leader, because it changes everything about how we are in the world. That in Resonate, I take it even further to how we can use training like meditation to see the ego and see through the ego, so we start to use it in its differentiated skill set and its gifts, rather than making all the energy of life just serve us. So we have to take care of ourselves because we're human beings, we're biological systems, we have needs, we need to eat, we need to love. There's some needs that we have, and yet these needs also have natural fill lines if they're healthy needs. If they're not healthy needs, they can be neurotic and unfillable, and that's some of the work to clean up. But if they're healthy needs, we, in a sense, eat just enough, and we're able to operate in a healthy, resonant state. So there are physical practices we can do to integrate, tune, and tame our instrument so that it will vibrate freely with the energy that is, and add its gifts in a way that serves the bigger picture. In other words, makes our greatest difference.
So I really love that term that you use, being your best instrument and ring your true note. So I'm a musician also, so I really resonate with that as well. Could you share one of those practices to help us become our best instrument?
Well, sure. Even as you sit there now, just feel where you feel breath in your body. Just feel where it is happening in your body. What it actually is moving. And what I invite you into is to let out a deep sigh of relief. We say, and notice, did it go down or up? Does the breath go down with a sigh of relief, or is it higher in the body? Just feel what your body is telling you. In my body, it goes down. There's a sense of, I can feel gravity even a little more in my body when the sigh of relief, because the body's relaxing. So you can let out another sigh of relief and just drop in. And what I invite you to do, and even as you listen to this program, if you're able to connect your feet to the earth, especially your big toes, just connect your big toes as if you could gently plug them into the earth. And then on your next exhale, just let that exhale drain down through the lower abdomen, this power center we call hara in the Japanese martial arts, and then right through your big toes into the earth. Let your eyes come to 180 degrees, and then when the next inhale comes to you, plug in your big toes and let the exhale drop down. And just feel that exhale lengthen luxuriously, deep in the body, deep into the earth. And just one more breath this way, and notice what is shifting for you. You can probably hear it in my voice because I'm breathing along with you, but you can feel in my voice how it takes on a slightly warmer quality. And as a musician, Patrick, you can appreciate that when you get into a more resonant quality, when the voice starts coming lower and deeper in the body in a more relaxed way, it takes on a warmth. Versus when we get upset and uptight, or when we hear really shrill, broadcasters or politicians, we can hear how high up in the body it's coming. It's when we're deep and centered like this, that when we talk with one another, we're sending out a signal that is helping the other person become more deep and centered. It helps other people settle down. It's in our language, settle down, calm down. The breath can take us down into this more resonant state. And this condition of deep breathing through the hara is something you can practice at any time. We make a very intentional practice of it in the style of Zazen or Zen training that I do. But you can do it at any time of lengthen that exhale, drop it through your hara, through your big toes, into the earth. Just that gesture. You're relaxing the body and allowing even the sound of your voice, which is a resonant signal, one of the many you're putting into the world, but an important one. You can feel that starts to change.
I love, the breath. We've been doing breath work for many, many years. And this is just a really great exercise to remind people, especially in these chaotic times, to breathe.
That's
So
right.
thank you for sharing that, Ginny. And, I was delving through the Zen Leader book, subtitled 10 Ways to Go from Barely Managing to Leading Fearlessly. And we've all probably at some point had one of those bosses that was kind of controlling. And there's a whole chapter called From Controlling to Connecting. And I think this is really important because, especially now we feel that we're losing our freedoms, that people are trying to control us, government leaders and so forth. So how do we go from controlling to connecting? What's this all about?
Well, it's related to what the flip we were just talking about of how the ego tries to feel safe. I mean, if you think about why do we try to control things? Why are there controlling bosses? Why do we control things? It's to try to make the world the way I want it, right? It's forget the ball on fast moving waters. I want it this outcome. I want it this way. So it's using life to try to meet my agenda. That's a way to live, but it tends to be a very tight and tense way to live that creates tension, tightness, and difficulty around it. And we're seeing plenty of evidence of that in our world today. And to flip that around into a connecting state, we can connect with people. That's more that collaborator pattern with the big picture. That's that visionary pattern. We can go further, connect with the earth, connect with the conditions around us, vibrate with the weather of the day, as we used in the sailboat example. Through that sense of expansive connection, now, how do I sail my course? And so what we're controlling is our reactions to the conditions around us, but not the outcome. We're controlling how we're navigating moment by moment with the conditions, but we're not saying it has to be this or that way at the end of the day. And it's a much more healthy way to lead, a much less exhausting way to lead, and a much more, I want to say, realistic way to lead, where So it's sustainable. In other words, it's sustainable, where we can still have clear intention and a lot of passion for where we want to go. And then we keep listening to conditions in this connected state and adjust our sails on the way.
Beautiful.
So a lot of this, I've found a lot of these practices, it requires a shift in thinking that you really incorporate these as a lifestyle, as a way of life. Just like when we get up in the morning, most people have incorporated brushing their teeth because they know that if their breath smells kind of bad, people are going to be, a little bit standoffish and stuff. So I think of meditation the same way, that, we need to get up, we need to start incorporating meditation into our day. But we're so busy, and it seems like the number of distractions and things that are pressing on our time is just accelerating. So with people feeling so busy, so exhausting, how is it possible to incorporate these techniques for people who are already so busy that they're just exhausted?
Yeah. I always ask myself when I feel busy, what am I so busy about, and who's busy? Who's this I who's so busy, who thinks he's got such a busy agenda? What are you not listening to? But I know how easy it is to get spun up in a busy day or an inbox full of emails, and they're coming in faster than they're going out, and this demand and that screw up. And I understand. I mean, I've worked in the world of leaders for many years and have been there myself and still there myself. I'm running an institute. So I get how spun up things can be, and where we can feel there's no time for practice. And yet, what's so clear is that this instrument you're working with is your instrument of leadership. It exists nowhere else. And if this instrument is just like, you're a musician, Patrick, if this instrument is out of tune and it's out of touch and it's disintegrated, has a few cracks in it, you try to play that and it's going to be lousy. It doesn't matter how many things you do. They're all going to be lousy, So it's almost like you have an instrument that can be magnificent. What could possibly be worth our, effort to make it work well? And that said, we don't have to start by saying, I'm going to change everything about my whole 24-hour day. We can start in bite-sized chunks, where I'll use your brushing the teeth example, where we might do some breathing exercises when we get up in the morning to settle down and remember who we are, to remember how breath can integrate our whole body. We might find that we need to have some meditation time in our day just to have that stillness so the brain will slow down, because as the breath slows down and the body stops, the rate at which thoughts develop will slow down. When we drop into that frequency, we might be able to come back to our day with much better rhythm, where we can catch the rhythm of that day, where we can work with it rather than bumping up against it. What I have found over my, 30 or 40 years now of meditation practice is that sense that you describe, where it becomes a lifestyle, it grew on me slowly. I didn't start out saying this was going to be my new lifestyle. I started out meditating because my Aikido teacher said it would make me better at Aikido, so I started sitting with a group, because I wanted to be better, and then he said, if you want to reach the peak of your game, you have to start meditating. And of course I was so ambitious, I wanted to be better, so I started meditating. So my ego would be better in a way, it was like, you could call it a completely backwards reason, but the training itself changes us. So what started as a little 20-minute slice in my day started growing. In fact, one of my Zen teachers had a lovely piece of advice. He said, sit 20 minutes a day, it'll change your life. And I thought, I'm a scientist. I'm going to test this hypothesis. I'm going to try this practice. So I did start sitting 20 minutes a day initially so I could be better at Aikido or reach the peak of my game. But the practice itself started showing me what's possible. And then it widened into, I want to eat a little healthier too, or I want to be more aware of when my sleep patterns are good or bad, or I want to be more conscious of how I enter that conversation, so I'm going to center myself in this conversation rather than be all distracted. And after a while, all the micro moments of practice open up. And so what I share and resonate are both practices that can be their own concrete, 5, 10, 20 minutes a day, but also the micro practices of how we can come into this conversation or this team meeting in a way where we're going to do it anyway. So this isn't going to take any more time, but how to do it well, how to do it as your most resonant self. The practice is what helps build that in your body, because truthfully, you and I today are going to resonate like we resonate. We are a physical instrument and it's going to vibrate the way it vibrates. But if we devote some of the moments today to that integrating, tuning, and taming, we're going to have an even more resonant instrument tomorrow. So this is an invitation both to finding the micro moments in the day where we can practice on things that we're going to have to do anyway, so they take no extra time, but also those intentional moments in the day where we relax, integrate, tune, tame, and can be even more resonant for the self that meets the next moment.
Kind of like the slow is the new fast, I guess. It's the paradox that if we slow down, we think we'll get less done, but it's actually the reverse. The more that we take time to visualize and meditate and slow down, actually we can actually create more. That's exactly what I've found. So we've got a couple minutes left, Ginny, and I just wanted to remind our listeners of where they can find you. Do you want to tell everybody your website and the programs that you offer?
Well, thank you. It's a generous opportunity. ZenLeader.global is probably the best place to find me. ZenLeader.global. It's the website for our Institute for Zen Leadership. We have open programs where the very things you've heard us talking about, we invite people into those practices and immerse them in the practices, in the physical training and both the patterns as well as in Zen training and breathing. So ZenLeader.global, you can get information about any of those programs. You can also learn more about Resonate the Book at resonatethebook.com. So there's some free videos and companion exercises that come with the book. It won't be out for until middle of October, as Patrick said earlier, but it's pre-orderable now, and there's some resources where you can practice the exercises with me that you can download from resonatethebook.com.
Oh, wonderful, Ginny. I'm sure people are going to definitely be needing your services these days. And I just thought we could end with the last chapter of your Zen Leader book is From Delusion to Awakening. And we're all about the spiritual awakening here on Spirit's Journey. So would you like to leave the audience with something about this awakening process?
This awakening process, it's there's a sense of, I want to call it identity theft that goes on in us, where we think we are our ego, what I call the local self in the Zen leader. And our mood rises and falls with that ego. The needs of that ego can become unfillable, and we can start using, as I mentioned earlier, the resources of life to meet the ego's needs. But flip that around. And for a moment, even as you listen to these words, feel into the expansive possibility that you are the whole picture. The true human body is the entire universe, as my Zen teacher's teacher once said. Feel into being the whole picture in which even your differentiated self arises. And as you train more, that possibility becomes your direct experience. How you live and lead changes radically. And I just invite you, as you're listening, into that possibility and into the practices that make it your reality.
Well, Ginny, thank you so much for being here with us today. We've been on with Ginny Whitelaw, author of The Zen Leader, as well as her new book, Resonate, Zen and the Way of Making a Difference. You've been listening to Spirit's Journey. We are on Truth Frequency Radio, simulcast on Once Talk Radio, among others. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Kathryn. Have a wonderful week. We'll catch you next Saturday.
See you on the other side.